Hi, I'm Geoff Kersey, and in this programme I'm going to be showing you lots of different tips and techniques to help you with your watercolour landscape painting. In this tip I'm going to show you how you can add a figure into your landscape painting. It may be that you've completed the picture and you feel it needs just something else, maybe a figure walking along the path to lead the viewer into the scene, or you might want to add the person to put a bit of extra colour, a little splash of another colour that isn't there anywhere else in the scene. So first of all I would draw the little figure onto just a piece of cartridge paper from a sketch pad, just in pencil, keeping it fairly small so that we don't have to put too much detail in, and the figure can actually look as though it's walking into the landscape away from the viewer. A good rule of thumb here is to make the head go about 8 times into the body. That gives you about the right scale for an average height person. Okay, having done that, I now get a piece of tracing paper and I trace the little drawing. And when I've traced the drawing, I'm moving it across to the drawing board, and with a sharp knife with a good point to it, I'm just going to cut out the coat part or torso of the little figure, taking care not to tear the tracing paper. We don't need to worry about the legs or the head at the moment, you'll see why shortly. And I can just remove that. Then I'm going to take this across to the painting and position it. So we can just put the little figure on tracing paper onto the finished painting and decide the best position for it. There are a few positions that would be wrong. For instance, there where that line of the distance cuts right through where the head is. That looks odd. Also somewhere like there would be wrong, because again you've got where the coat finishes and the legs start, and you'd have a line right through that point. A better position is something like that, is on the path, and that line of distance cuts round about through the middle of the person. That also looks to be about the right scale. Then, holding the tracing paper in position, I'm going to get a natural sponge, and then over that area where I cut out the little shape, I'm just sponging away the paint like that, and remove that quickly, and you can see that I've created an area going back to white paper in just the shape of that figure's coat, but we need to leave that to dry now. So now that that's dried, I'm just taking a number 2 detailer brush, and I want to pick a colour for this person's coat. I'm going to go for red, because it's a good contrast to the green. It will really make them stand out and draw the viewer's eye to them. And I've got a bit of vermilion, to which I'm going to add a little touch of Oriel in. Red always seems a little bit brighter with a touch of yellow with it. And then I'm going to carefully paint the shape of the coat in. And because I'd sponged away the colour, the red looks a lot more brighter and sharper than if I was trying to paint it with that purple of the distant trees and the green behind it. Okay, so that's the coating. I'm now going to take some ultramarine blue with a bit of burnt sienna to make a rich dark brown colour for the legs of the figure. Again, still with the number 2 brush with a really good point so that I can make them pointed as we reach the ground. Don't start painting details like feet on and this sort of thing. The figure's walking away from you, so you don't really see feet as such. Now, so that there's a shadow side to the coat, I've just got a little bit of cobalt blue and vermilion. Gives a bit of shadow. The light's coming from the right, so I'm just going to brush a bit of that purpley colour to darken the red at the left-hand side away from the light, and then with a bit more of the red, soften that in. And then with that rich dark brown, that ultramarine and burnt sienna, we'll put the head in. Leave a slight gap between the shoulders and the head to suggest the to suggest the colour, or they'll look like they're hunched up. Okay, now everything in a scene casts a shadow, so with a bit more of that cobalt blue and vermilion, that shadow colour from the feet, and you'll see what a difference it makes to this figure once there's a shadow in the scene. And still with the number 2 brush, we'll get a shadow going across the path, describing the slope of the path as well. Okay, so that's just added a little bit of extra life to the scene. In this example of painting water, I'm going to show you how I'll give the impression of light reflecting on the surface of the water by using a method called wax resist. I've taken a piece of candle and using a craft knife, I've cut one edge away so that I've got a flat area to lay against the paper. And I'm just running this across the water area. It is a little bit hit and miss because you can't see what you're doing. Until you apply the paint, you can't see what's there. And what it's doing is going to make certain areas of the rough surface of the paper resistant to the paint. I've mixed up the same colours again that I used in the background so I can get quite accurate looking reflections. And I'm just going to take a number 10 brush and start by wetting the whole of this water area. And you can feel as you're adding the water now where the paper is resisting it because of the wax laying on the surface. It's important when you do this to use rough paper. You definitely need that texture on the paper to get this effect. Now in the sky here I used a bit of cobalt blue with rose madder. So I've got that now to put into the water area. Running it along, and you can see in some areas it takes to the paper and lies there on the surface, and in others it resists it and rests on the top. Running that across there. And then so that we can get a feeling of the reflection of that bit of green on the bank, we'll put a touch of that in both sides, still leaving a tiny little bit of white under the bank. There's a little bit of brown in there, some burnt sienna and cobalt blue. Both sides of that. Bit more of that green across in the distance there, a little bit stronger. And a bit more of the brown, burnt sienna and cobalt blue again. And then a bit of the rich dark green in these fir trees, and that's a mixture of ultramarine blue, oriolin and a little touch of burnt sienna. And just to sort of get that feeling of reflection from the dark green, I'm sweeping some of these in from both sides. And you can see how where that wax is on the paper, it leaves that little bit of sparkle in the water. Let's just mix some more of the cobalt blue and rose madder, just to put a bit more of that across the bottom. And just to help with that reflection in the water, I've got the 1/2 inch flat brush again, which is clean and damp. Not wet through, just damp. And I'm just going to do a little bit of that dragging down to emphasise the fact that the water is, apart from the ripples disturbing the surface, the water is still. Okay, we'll leave that to dry. Now that that's dry, I'm just going to enhance the effect of the light on the water with some opaque white. I've got a damp number 4 brush, and let's start in the distance with a few little lines and marks, just giving the effect of a broken surface reflecting the bright light. Maybe help that little line under the edge there. And you can see how that just builds on what we've already started with the wax resist. Build a few ripples in amongst the white paper and a few amongst the darker paper. Maybe a little bit into the foreground as well, just to give the impression of a disturbed surface. And you need to, when you do this, you need to make sure you really do work on a level. One thing about water, it always finds a level. So if your little ripples, etc., slope downhill, then it just really ruins the effect. So you really do have to check that you're working level. So that's finished.